And today we are taking you straight to the beach resorts of Tunisia in 1967.
Right, for a chess tournament that became, well, less about strategy on the board and much more about psychological warfare, and frankly, a complete organizational meltdown.
We're plunging into the 1967 Sousse Interzonal tournament. And this was an event that, on paper, it should have been this pristine, high-stakes qualifier for the World Championship.
But it wasn't.
Not even close. The sources paint a far, far messier picture. This was a crucible where profound organizational chaos met the volatile genius of one man, Robert Fischer.
And it just resulted in this unforgettable drama.
It really did.
Okay, so let's unpack this. Our source material describes the atmosphere as generating these truly African emotions, a very of-the-era phrase.
Right. And the whole event was defined not so much by the winner, which, for the record, was Bent Larsen, but by two massive, off-the-board seismic events.
First, the explosive, almost self-sabotaging withdrawal of Bobby Fischer.
And second, an incident of just blatant cheating that shocked the entire chess community. The infamous Jadoub incident.
So that's our mission today, isn't it?
Yeah.
We need to look at the sources and understand how all these things, geopolitical pressures, organizational amateurism, and one man's personality collided.
Exactly. And you can't forget the geopolitical side. The Soviets had huge expectations placed on their delegation. You had Geller, Korchnoi, Stein, and Gipsless. They were supposed to dominate.
But instead, this whole competition just turned into one of the most famous chess melodramas of the entire 20th century.
And the stakes, you have to remember the stakes couldn't have been higher for the players.
This was the Interzonal. This was the gateway to the candidates' matches.
The only way to get a shot at the reigning world champion, Tigran Petrosian. And in those opening rounds, all eyes, and I mean all eyes, were fixed on the blistering start from the two Western superstars.
Bent Larsen and Robert Fischer. This was, for all intents and purposes, supposed to be their coronation.
It certainly started that way.
So to understand how it all unraveled, we have to start with the setting, right? Sousse, Tunisia?
Yeah, you really do. It was, by all accounts, a stunning location. It was often described as the Pearl of the Sahel, right there on the coast.
Beautiful.
But it was hosting an elite, high-pressure international competition for the very first time.
And the sources are pretty blunt about the feeling going in. Mm-hmm. There were these widespread, immediate fears that the Tunisian Federation, they just might not be up to the task.
It wasn't really a question of capability, maybe, so much as experience. They just hadn't handled something of this magnitude before.
And those fears, they were realized almost immediately.
Oh, yeah. The organization was repeatedly criticized by observers. They called it unsophisticated, amateurish, just severely lacking the professional rigor you need for a world championship qualifier.
So they're playing in this luxurious 10-story hotel, the Sousse Palace, which sounds amazing.
A beautiful environment, no doubt. But the conditions inside the tournament hall, dictated by the schedule, were absolutely grueling.
And this is where we get that account from Grandmaster Vejrikov, right? Korchnoi's second.
Exactly, yeah. Vejrikov. And he provides this detailed, really damning account of a punishing schedule that seemed almost designed to wear the competitors down both physically and mentally.
That source material really drives home how physically taxing this event was.
Yeah.
Vejrikov describes a routine. What was it? Daily evening rounds that started late.
Late evening rounds, yes. And crucially, these were followed immediately the next morning by sessions just for playing out adjourned games.
So they were basically mandatory doubleheaders.
That's a great way to put it. And unlike, modern tournaments, there were no stipulated rest days built into the schedule for recovery.
None at all.
Any day that was designated as off was immediately just swallowed up. You'd use it for makeup sessions or to play out those long adjourned games.
The consequence was predictable, I guess?
Totally. Bosyukov noted that by the later stages, the competitors were universally, quote, quite groggy. They were functioning on minimal sleep, minimal prep time, just this constant grinding pressure.
And that relentless pace was made even worse by what a lot of the contemporary sources saw as a huge mistake by FIDE.
The participant management, yeah.
The number of entrants was just huge. It was originally 24, ended up being 23.
And this massive field was instantly criticized. They called it a super marathon. It was far too large and exhausting for an elite qualifier, especially one that didn't have any real rest days. And this whole organizational sleight of hand, it just underscores this massive systemic problem that people like Boris Spassky were pointing to. The whole interzonal was flawed from the start because of FID policy.
Spassky's critique was pretty scathing.
Oh, it was philosophically pointed. He argued that FIDE's policy, which came from this admirable desire to include players from all continents.
Right, regardless of their rating or achievements.
Exactly. But it fundamentally weakened the field. His concern was that weak masters, who had, in his words, no relation to the question of the world champion, were taking spots from leading grandmasters.
And he was blunt about it. He said something like, the law is the law, but FIDE's rules were basically distorting the whole competitive integrity of the cycle.
That's right. By including what the sources estimate were at least 5 truly weak players, FIDE turned the Interzonal into this exhausting gauntlet of marathon instead of a focused battle between the genuine contenders.
So the system was prioritizing geographical diversity over pure competition at the highest level.
And this is a key takeaway for you listening. The problem of the World Championship selection process being too bloated, dragging in hundreds of players lasting years, this was recognized as a serious flaw even back in 1967.
The sources say the whole system had long caused serious doubts.
And Sousse just proved all those doubts correct through sheer organizational failure.
Okay, so into this chaos walks Bobby Fischer.
Yes. And despite the amateurish organization, despite the punishing schedule, Fischer arrived and just started the tournament on fire.
He was producing a highly favorable impression, playing what were described as superb games. Just brilliant tactical vision.
His opening run was nothing short of phenomenal. Before his eventual withdrawal, he racked up a score of 8.5 points out of 10.
That's an 85% win rate. It's staggering.
It is. Eyewitness accounts talk about his near-perfect game against the 3-time Soviet champion Leonid Stein. It lasted 6 hours and just left Stein completely dismantled.
And what's fascinating is the commentary on his character. At the board, he was self-assured and never plays for a draw.
Right. Enormous practical strength, phenomenal memory. He was just crushing opponents. He never got a break against Fischer. He was always pushing for the win.
But his presence, as was often the case, was tied to money.
Always. The sources explicitly mention his reputation as a frank worshiper of the golden calf. He had these very specific, high demands for appearance fees.
And the organizers in Sousse refused them.
They refused his initial demands, yeah. But his presence was ultimately secured when he reportedly got a payment of $3,500 from the wife of the American patron, J. Piatigorsky. So for Fischer, money was always a prerequisite.
So the financial hurdle gets cleared, but the chronological one, that proved to be impossible.
And this leads us right to the critical scheduling dispute, which was rooted in religious observance.
Right. Fischer was a follower of the Worldwide Church of God.
And Samuel Reshevsky was an Orthodox Jew. Both required accommodation for not playing from Friday sundown to Saturday sundown, the Sabbath.
So FIDE had rules for this.
They did. Initially, the rules stipulated that the Saturday rounds would begin late at 7 p.m., specifically to accommodate these 2 American GMs. That was the compromise.
But the other players, they didn't like that.
They objected vigorously. And this wasn't just grumbling. The sources say the objection was based on very practical logistical nightmares created by the amateur organization.
Okay, what were the problems?
Well, starting at 7 p.m., the rounds wouldn't end until well past midnight. And in Sousse, which wasn't a major city, players found it very difficult to find a restaurant open late to get dinner.
And then they had to be up early for adjournments the next morning.
Exactly. It wrecked everyone's sleep, their preparation, their well-being in an already grueling super marathon. So the arbiters, they recognized this, and they put the late start to a vote.
And the results were overwhelming.
21-1. 21 competitors voted to start the round at the normal earlier time of 4 p.m. Only Fischer voted against it.
And Reshevsky.
Reshevsky abstained. Maybe he saw the writing on the wall, so the schedule was changed by a massive majority vote.
Fischer initially went along with it, but this is where the organizers made another huge mistake.
A critical, almost fatal error. The sources suggest that the organizers may be trying to placate Fischer after he lost the vote. They granted him free days for a bunch of other religious holidays in October.
Which was meant as a service.
It turned into an ill service, a disaster.
Because the unforeseen consequence was that he immediately built up this massive backlog of games.
4 missed games. And the already exhausted organizers then had to frantically try and compress them into a single week to get him caught up.
And that compression is what created the crisis. But before we get to the walkout, the sources point to a really interesting contradiction in Fischer's behavior.
Yes, this is Vasikov again, Korchnoi second. He gives this eyewitness account of the paradox.
He noted that while Reshevsky, the Orthodox Jew, actually observed the Sabbath, and went to the Tunisian synagogue for prayers.
Fischer stayed behind at the hotel.
And what was Fischer doing during his supposedly sacred day of rest?
He wasn't praying, he was analyzing games, and in this truly bizarre detail, he went up to the Soviet grandmasters, the guys he was competing against, and asked them to teach him how to play dominoes.
Dominoes? You're kidding.
Not at all. Vasyukov says he then played dominoes with gusto all evening.
So you have this stunning paradox. On the one hand, extreme, uncompromising strictness about a 2-hour scheduling change that affected everyone.
And on the other, extremely flexible observance when it came to, socializing and playing games that he personally enjoyed.
It really suggests that the religious demands, well, maybe genuine on some level, were also a tool.
Or a shield for his deeper, overwhelming need for absolute control over his environment and his schedule. When he was winning, he needed perfection. When he was relaxing, the rules were a bit more fluid.
And that need for control just kept escalating, didn't it?
Oh, absolutely. It manifested in these increasingly chaotic, almost impossible demands about the playing conditions, which, to be fair, were pretty substandard.
The sources list a whole catalog of his complaints. Noisy spectators, bad lighting.
And especially the photographers using flashlights. That was a huge, genuine problem in that era.
His volatility was just astonishing. The eyewitness accounts confirm it. In just 2 days, he changed his playing table 5 times.
5 times. Just desperately seeking silence or better light. And he was constantly trying to shake off the press, moving his hotel room 4 times during his stay.
He was treating the tournament hall like his own personal lab.
Totally. He required these 2 additional heavy floor lamps that were brought in just for him. And these lamps literally roamed with him around the stage as he shifted tables.
And he just stopped the game.
Abruptly. He'd leave the stage for 10 or 15 minutes, refusing to come back until a photographer, even one whose camera was packed away in a case, was physically removed from the area.
So this whole pressure cooker environment, already strained, finally just blows up when they try to compress his schedule.
That was the final straw. He demanded yet another extra day off, arguing the compressed schedule was unfair.
And when the organizers, who were probably at their wits' end, finally refused,
he summarily withdrew. Just like that. Packed his bags, and left Sousse, drove 140 kilometers to Tunis.
And the immediate result of that first walkout was a forfeit.
A forfeit against the Soviet Grandmaster Avars Gipslis. And even at this point, the U.S. Embassy and the organizers were desperately begging him to come back.
They knew they needed him in the cycle.
Of course. And he was eventually persuaded to return, mainly through the efforts of a local Tunisian master, Rida Belkadi.
Which led to one of the most dramatic moments of the whole tournament. His game against his fellow American, Samuel Reshevsky.
You have to picture the scene. Reshevsky, who's been told he's won by default, is getting ready for a day off. He's watching the clock tick down, probably feeling a mix of relief and pity.
And the deadline for forfeit is 1 hour. Fischer arrives. 53 minutes late.
53 minutes late. He has 7 minutes left on his clock before he loses automatically.
The atmosphere must have been agonizing. The sources describe Reshevsky as emotionally drained. He was sure he wasn't going to play.
And then in strides Fischer, not looking apologetic, but broadly grinning, as if he'd just been caught in traffic.
The audacity is incredible.
But it masked this extreme motivation to punish the man who waited for him. Fischer, now super focused, just demolishes the veteran. It was a victory of pure competitive will over shattered nerves.
But the officials were not impressed.
Not at all. Immediately after the game, they hand him this formal memorandum. It demanded 2 things: a written apology and a promise to stick to the schedule.
And his response was pure Fischer.
Absolutely classic. He took the official document and just ostentatiously tore it up into pieces without even reading it. The conflict had become a battle of wills.
And the final dispute was about that first forfeited game against Gipslis.
Right. Fischer insisted on replaying it. His argument was a bit legalistic, but, as one source called it, surprisingly lucid.
What was his logic?
He claimed that since he had officially withdrawn from the tournament when that game was scheduled, he couldn't logically have forfeited it.
That's a fascinating, if circular piece of logic.
It is. If he hadn't forfeited, he shouldn't be back. But if he was back, the forfeiture had to stand. But, the politics of the time really sealed his fate here.
Because he'd forfeited to a Soviet player.
And the huge Soviet delegation who benefited directly from that half point was absolutely unyielding. They were not giving it back.
They knew if the organizers caved to Fischer, it would be seen as this huge, unacceptable concession to an American prima donna.
It would have caused a mutiny among the other players who were actually following the rules.
So, faced with that refusal, Fischer walks out again.
For a second time. Back to Tunis, which immediately results in a second forfeit. This time to the Czechoslovak GM Vlastimil Hort.
At this point, the organizing committee has finally had enough.
They've reached their limit. They issue a final document, a final ultimatum. Fischer has to confirm in writing that he accepts both losses, Gipsley's and Hort, and promise to finish the tournament. Sign or you're expelled.
And the sources describe these frantic last-minute negotiations.
High-stakes stuff. The U.S. ambassador gets involved. A police-escorted car is arranged to rush him back from Tunis. The Soviet GM Gofeld recounts sitting in the telephone booth, just listening to these agonizing calls being made as the clock on Fischer's next game was starting.
His game against Bent Larsen.
Right. And the drama peaks right then. Fischer's on the phone, and he sounds, less confident. He's got these plaintive notes in his voice. He finally yields.
He agrees to accept the 2 forfeits.
He does, but true to form, he has one last controlling demand. He asks Bent Larsen, his opponent, to wait 1.5 hours for him to drive back from Tunis.
And this was the decisive moment.
It was. Larsen, who is completely frustrated by all the disruptions, delivers the fatal firm refusal. He just says, no, the clock has been started.
Hey, that was it.
That was it. Within the hour, Fischer was declared lost by default for a third time. His entire phenomenal score of 8.5 out of 10 was canceled, and he was expelled from the World Championship cycle.
And, as he left, he reportedly said to GM Gligoric, "You can write, I am leaving these patzers."
Just
incredible.
It is. And you can feel the pity and the anger from his rivals. Tao said it was a great pity such a talent excluded himself. Larsen just called the conduct abnormal.
It's that one observation that really sticks with me. The virtuoso pianist who refused to play because the stool was an inch too low.
It's a perfect summary. The self-sabotage was absolute.
As huge as that whole Fischer drama was, the sources show there was another completely different controversy brewing.
A different kind of destructive, yeah. And one that some observers, like the English arbiter Harry Golombek, found far worthier of condemnation than Fischer's crazy behavior.
Right, because Fischer's behavior was ultimately self-destructive. This was something else. This was the ethical breach, the Jadub incident.
Perpetrated by the Yugoslav Grandmaster Milan Matulovic against the Czech GM Bilek in round 9.
And for anyone listening who isn't deep into competitive chess, we should probably explain the touch move rule.
It's the most fundamental, sacred rule of the game. It's simple. If you intentionally touch one of your pieces, you have to move it. Unless
you first say Jadub, which is French for I adjust.
Right. And once you make a move, let go of the piece and press your clock, your turn is absolutely unequivocally over.
And Matulovic's violation was so outrageous because it subverted every single one of those elements.
Every one. He moved his bishop to a square, he removed his hand, and then he pressed the clock. Move complete.
But at that moment, he realizes he's made a game-losing blunder.
A massive tactical oversight.
Yeah.
And having illegally finished his turn and seen the disaster, Matulovic does the unthinkable. He retracts the move.
He just takes it back.
Physically takes the bishop back to its original square. And only then does he exclaim, in German, Ich spreche Jadub, I say I adjust.
The sheer nerve of it is just breathtaking. He's trying to rewind time, using a phrase meant to be used before you touch a piece, after he'd already completed his move.
And then he just plays a different piece entirely and continues the game as if nothing happened.
And Bielik, his opponent.
The sources say Bielik, who was a calm guy, literally jumped up on his chair in protest. He stopped the clock, demanded the arbiter. I mean, Matulovic had openly, cynically cheated.
And this is where the organizational chaos of Sousse rears its ugly head again.
It proved devastating to competitive integrity. The officials had a clear-cut rule violation. It should have been an immediate loss for Matulovic.
But the acting tournament director, a local man named Ben Cheek, he refused to enforce the rules.
Despite Bielik's protest, Cheek just ordered him to continue play with Matulovic's illegal second move standing. The arbiters simply lacked the backbone or the expertise to enforce FID regulations.
And the appeals committee.
In a truly amazing and bewildering display of spinelessness, they refused to punish him. They just let the game stand as a draw. Matulovic kept the half point he got through cheating.
But the other players condemned it. Right. Especially his own teammates.
Oh, that was the most damning reaction. His Yugoslav teammates declared a formal boycott against him. They refused to speak to him, forced him to eat alone for the rest of the tournament.
They knew it was a stain on their national reputation.
Exactly. They called him not a gentleman and were worried he'd try it again.
And this is where that dark joke started.
The infamous piece of dark humor. The story went that Matulovic had choked on a fish bone at lunch, but the doctor couldn't find it, suggesting instead that the word Jadubovich had gotten stuck in his throat.
Jadubovich.
Yeah.
A portmanteau of Jadub in his name.
And that nickname stuck to him for years.
So the swindle could have completely distorted the World Championship cycle. But there was a twist of irony.
A profound twist, yeah. Matulovic needed to qualify for the candidates matches, but he just failed to do so by the narrowest of margins, half a point. So his cheating didn't end up having the maximum possible impact.
So with Fischer's score nullified and all that chaos finally settled, what were the final results?
Well, Bent Larsen, despite everything, secured a phenomenal first place with 15.5 out of 21. He was followed by Geller, Gligoric, and Korknoy, who got the other qualifying spots.
And Korknoy's qualification was pretty dramatic in itself.
It was. He had a really slow, struggling start. At one point, it looked like he was out of it, especially after the half point he had from Fischer was canceled.
But he managed to rally.
Incredibly. The sources highlight his finish. He rang up an exceptional 5.5 out of 6 possible points to just clinch his spot. It was a victory of pure competitive resilience.
For the overall Soviet performance, with only 2 of their 4 aces qualifying outright, that caused a lot of anxiety back home.
A lot of anxiety. For the Soviets, chess success was about geopolitical and ideological superiority. So when only 2 GMs qualified, with Stein needing a playoff, the USSR Sport Committee was deeply alarmed.
The head of their chess section, M. Bylan, publicly called it an unsuccessful performance and said it required serious analysis.